Japan is to economics what Axl Rose is to the music industry. They both rocked in the late 80s and the beginning of the 90s, then they started losing ground, and nowadays anytime they try to make a comeback, the results are pretty disappointing. I know what you're thinking. At first glance, Japan doesn't seem to be that bad, right? I mean, they have the video games, the anime movies, and world-class tech behemoths. And their capital, Tokyo, well, that looks like a sci-fi city. It's the world's biggest metropolis with over 30 million people, and they have the fastest trains, the most modern TVs, and even human-like robots. Nonetheless, this country has gone through 2 decades without any economic growth. And that's not the worst of it. Japan is the most indebted country in the world. They owe more than twice their entire GDP, and the population is decreasing faster than anywhere else, which poses a big problem when it comes to paying for retirement pensions. This is one of the reasons why Japanese workers have crazy hours and almost no vacation time. And those good old technological juggernauts like Hitachi or Panasonic are falling behind the more modern companies from China and America. Just hold on a second, because things, they might be on the verge of change. Yes, I'm talking here about the Tokyo Olympics due to take place in 2020. It's a peerless opportunity to showcase their entire country and get the world's attention. Yes, dear viewer, ever since Japan won the Olympic bid in 2013, tourism has absolutely skyrocketed.
And the same goes with private investment. By the year 2020, Tokyo will have 45 brand new skyscrapers. And companies like Panasonic will set state-of-the-art solar cells in increasing locations so people can charge their electric cars anywhere. And if this wasn't enough, Sony will launch their brand new 8K TV screens.
Yes, you heard that right. Soon enough, we are going to have 8K so you can see every microfiber of the athletes' t-shirts. But hold on for just a second here, because not everything is so beautiful. You see, when Tokyo won the Olympic bid, they had budgeted $6.5 billion American dollars. But since they started building, the costs have doubled, and they haven't even finished yet. In fact, Tokyo City Hall has predicted that the total cost might be up to around 20 billion USD. So the question is, are the Olympic Games actually an opportunity for Japan, or quite the opposite? Are the Olympic Games as good for a country's economy as people say? Well, today we are going to answer those questions, but as we always do, let's take a look first back at the history.
An Olympic fallacy?
Very few things spark national pride quite as much as the Olympic Games. Of course, we all like to brag about the gold medals our country has, but what really inflames patriotism the most is becoming an Olympic host. The excitement it generates is so big that everyone, regardless of their ideology, seems to think that organizing an event for this, like the country, is a good thing. But from an economic standpoint, things are not that clear. In fact, the arguments in favor of hosting the Olympic Games are a little bit like, how should we say it? Well, they're as inconsistent as a tweet by Donald Trump.
According to a paper from the Bank of Japan, the effects of the Olympics are so positive that they can be felt even before the Olympics takes place. More specifically, the same year the International Olympic Committee named Tokyo as the host city, many started to see Japan as the perfect place for investment.
Remember that we're talking about a paper from an institution as prestigious as the Bank of Japan. This is basically the Japanese equivalent to the American Federal Reserve. That said, one of their main arguments is that if your city gets to become an Olympic host, the whole country can join all those big organizations that every country wants to be a member of. So how about an example? Well, Barcelona got the nomination in 1986, and boom, that very same year, Spain joined the EU. Beijing was nominated in 2001, and boom again, they joined the World Trade Organization that very year. It seems like this line of reasoning is pretty bulletproof, but just hold on a second, because this is a textbook example of something called correlation fallacy. In other words, the fact that Spain joined the EU the same year that Barcelona got chosen as the Olympic host does not mean that the one thing caused the other. In fact, Portugal also joined the EU in the same year, and they didn't host anything. And the same, well, it happened with China. At the same time, other Asian countries joined the WTO without organizing any sporting events. Now, just hold on a second, because I probably know what you're thinking right about now. And you're probably thinking, well, hey, Simon, well, what about other international attention that the Olympic Games can bring? I mean, for 2 whole weeks, the whole world is going to have their eyes on Japan. That's got to be a good thing, right? I mean, we're talking about the biggest sporting event in the world. Well, maybe not. You see, the London Olympics in 2012 got a pretty average audience. I mean, around 31 million Americans tuned in. To make a comparison, this is twice as much as an episode of Game of Thrones. And that wouldn't exactly be regarded as bad, but well, what about the rest of the games? Now, the Sochi Olympics in 2014 didn't even have 22 million viewers in the United States, and Rio in 2016, well, that was just 26 million. So now these numbers might look quite big to you right now, but it's really nothing if we compare it to a much cheaper event like the Super Bowl. The 2016 Super Bowl surpassed 110 million viewers. In other words, even though the Olympics are watched all around the world, when you look at the audience country by country, the figures aren't really that impressive. And this means that the perception people have about a country doesn't really change, at least it doesn't really seem to change for the good.
In a study of the impact of the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, Australian researchers interviewed people 1 year before and after the Games. They found little change in perceptions, with one surprising wrinkle. South Africans were displeased with Australia because of the way in which the Aboriginal issue was highlighted and portrayed by the South African media.
Nonetheless, there is one thing that it seems fair to agree on. Olympic Games do kickstart your tourism industry. Actually, since Tokyo was chosen as the Olympic host, tourism in Japan has absolutely skyrocketed. I mean, they almost didn't have any tourists in 2013, but last year, they surpassed 24 million people. You could say that essentially a brand new industry has just been born in Japan. And tourism, well, tourism is an industry that attracts a lot of foreign money. And foreign money, I mean, gotta be a good thing, right? Well, again, just hold on a minute, because even these figures, they're up for debate. Of course, tourism in Japan, it's increased a lot, but do you know of some other countries that also have a booming tourist sector right now? Well, Chile and Thailand are great examples. They have grown at a similar rate to Japan. And don't even Google it, because I'm going to tell you right now, neither of these countries is planning to host the Olympic Games anytime soon. The Thailand example is pretty paradigmatic. They get 6 million more tourists than Japan each year, and they have just half the population. And their tourism growth is directly correlated to that of the Chinese middle class. In other words, as Chinese people have more money, they want to do more sightseeing, and, well, where do they go? Well, they go to countries that are nearby and have beautiful things to see. Alright, so now you might be thinking, well, even if the Olympics aren't as profitable as they seem, well, what's the problem if Tokyo wants to host the Olympics? I mean, who doesn't like having a giant stadium in his city? Well, let's have a closer look at that one too.
Gold medalist. In spending.
Now, we all know that the Olympics are costly. From one day to the next, Tokyo basically went from not having to have an Olympic stadium to having to have one, which has to hold more than 80,000 people. And also, I mean, they have to impress everyone with lights and colors and all sorts of fancy things. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, they also need other special venues for the many competitions that are held at the same time. Each of the sports has its own specifications. In total, 31 venues will need to be built or remodeled for the Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympic Games. And then there's the media center, another giant white elephant, and on top of that, there's the Olympic Villa. The Olympic Villa is basically nothing short of a small town where 10,000 athletes are going to live during the Olympics. And as you can probably imagine, this is certainly not going to be cheap. Now, remember, the total cost for this was supposed to be 6.5 billion USD. At least this was the figure given by the local authorities to the International Olympic Committee in 2013. But as you know, theories are one thing and reality is something completely different.
Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games costs just keep rising.
By December 2017, Tokyo City Hall had already spent over $12 billion. And just a couple of months later, the local authorities reported that they would end up spending that whopping figure of at least $20 billion. And it's even possible that this figure will keep rising before they even begin to burn the Olympic flame. But I mean, none of this is really a surprise.
Since we can remember, every Olympic game has had significant cost overruns. Rio de Janeiro 2016 ended up costing 51% more than expected, but the record so far is Montreal 1976, which cost 700% more than was initially budgeted. You heard that right, 8 times more than what was first planned.
Alright, so now you might be wondering, well, are these billions of dollars really all that much money for a big government? I mean, compared with normal spending in a big city hall, is that actually a lot of money? Well, the answer to that is an absolutely resounding yes. For better understanding, with $20 billion you could build a highway that connected the extreme north of Japan to the extreme south, and that really isn't even the worst of it. You see, an airport or a highway can end up being a waste of money, but still, you can always reutilize it. A country with better infrastructure and communication can have better companies in the future, brand new industries, better public services. What do you get with an Olympic stadium that can host 80,000 people? Well, if we look at past examples, the answer to that question is pretty bleak.
Rio's Olympic venues already falling into a state of disrepair.
The Rio de Janeiro example is particularly harsh. Despite hosting the Olympics, they still have entire neighborhoods that aren't even connected to the city center by a bus line. And the place where the Olympic Villa was, well, that's becoming a slum. And this is not the only example.
Athens Olympic site in ruins 10 years on from the 2004 Games.
And then you've got to add to all of this that Japan is the most indebted country on the planet. They owe a sum equivalent to 230% of their GDP. The government is already struggling to pay retirement pensions, and they've already been 2 years without any economic growth whatsoever. But now it's over to you. Do you think the Tokyo Olympics in 2020 will mean the ruin of Japan? Or maybe, against the odds, do you think Japan will benefit from hosting the event? Well, please leave your answer in the comments section below. And if you want to know more about Japan's failed economy, please do click on this video. Also, do visit our friends from the Reconsider Media podcast. Go to reconsidermedia.com. This podcast provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And don't forget that we publish brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday, just like this. So hit that subscribe button and you won't miss a single post. Also, if you like this video, please do give a thumbs up. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear more of my lovely voice, don't forget to check out the Reconsider podcast at reconsidermedia.com.